Hey, friends, what's happening? Big Dog Ethan here, coming at you with an interview that I am super excited to share with you. This is an interview with Dan Whitfield and Shareef Snuggs. These are both people that I've interviewed before. I'm sure a lot of you who have been watching recently remember Shareef Snuggs. He came on the kennel in January to talk about his work with March for Medicare-For-All, and Dan Whitfield is a candidate running for U.S. Senate here in Arkansas. He's a Democratic candidate, to be specific, but he's not your usual Democratic candidate because he's not taking any corporate money. If you want an introduction to his platform overall, I suggest you go check out the interview that I did with him in July. You can also find that here on my Substack as well. Still kind of getting used to having to manage OBS while also doing an interview, and that's kind of why this interview took so long to put together. But hey, it's finally here. And yeah, I will say, personally, I don't think I did a great job at introducing this interview. I think it was a little bit slow to kind of hop on the train because I was just so overwhelmed with we're finally doing this interview kind of thing. And I kind of started off week in a little bit of a dazed state, I think, in the sense that just some of my questions that I asked at first, either didn't have much to do with the discussion or just phrased in a weird and awkward way that kind of made it hard for them to respond. For instance, I think the most obvious example that's going to appear here in the interview, I thought Dan Whitfield said dink machine, but he said think tank. I'd gotten my words confused whenever I was looking back and editing. Anyways, I don't know why I thought he said dink machine, but you have to admit, I think that's a pretty good insult. You know how the official term for what Chomsky calls his flak machines are think tanks. Maybe another I don't know, derogatory name you could use for those so-called think tanks that actually have a huge partisan bias and a huge corporate bias, more specifically. Call them dink tanks. I don't know. There's just something empty and hollow that sounds about that. I don't know. Call them dink tanks. There's something cartoonish and stupid sounding about that, I guess. I have no other way to phrase it. I just thought that would sound like a cool, I don't know, new derogatory phrase to start calling, those corrupt think tanks, which, let's be clear here, by the way, there are some think tanks that actually do put out good research. It's just, you have to check out the financial sources with those think tanks, because there's a good number of them that take funding from corporations. So, whenever it comes to things really just any kind of research that those corporations would have a conflict of interest in, that's a problem. So anyways, but yeah, other than that, I really like how this interview turned out, actually. I like that I was able to, once again, show off my audio mixing and editing abilities, especially this time with having two guests on at the same time. I was really able to, sort of show off how I really think podcasts should be mixed, right? I like the idea of having voices mapped out onto different parts of the stereo, because for one, I think, with podcasts, it's a lot of it's live discussion, so you have people talking over each other. It seems a lot more distracting and kind of garbled whenever you just have one channel in the middle where everyone's going over each other, because whenever you do it like this, you can have people, whenever one person talks over the other, one person's just going here and the other person's going here. it gives the recording more space whenever it plays back, and that's kind of what I like about it. So I hope you appreciate that as well, and I hope you appreciate the idea that we're trying to advocate for here, Medicare for all. I think it's a really important issue. The top reason for bankruptcy here in the United States is medical debt. And that is not a problem anywhere else, and we got to do something about it. So I think a plan like healthcare for all would be a viable solution. So without any further ado, here is our discussion. I'm gonna kind of start just a little bit past the intro because I kind of messed up the intro because I didn't introduce Dan Whitfield very well. I didn't even mention that he was a candidate running for Senate. So I'm just going to skip that part because it's just me kind of babbling on and going, let me think of the first question. I couldn't stand it. Couldn't stand it. So I'm just going to cut it out. So yeah, you're welcome.
So my name's Dan Whitfield. I am a Democratic candidate running for the United States Senate in Arkansas. And one of the top priorities of my policy platform is healthcare for all. We know that medical debt is the number one cause of bankruptcy in America. And unfortunately, 62.3% of all bankruptcies have to do with medical debt. And at the same time, 70% of those people who file bankruptcy for medical debt have medical insurance. They're paying high premiums, deductibles, and copays. They get sick and they lose everything. So it's an extremely important policy to tackle, and there's so much disinformation out there for what Medicare for all is. So I decided to change the phrasing because phrasing is so important when you're trying to get messaging out and get through to people. Because if you don't have the right phrasing, the right messaging, then people will just shut off and they're not going to pay attention. So the policy I support is healthcare for all. It's the same thing as Medicare for all, but I call it healthcare for all because it's not like Medicare. It doesn't have advantage plans. There's no supplements you have to pay for. Healthcare for all actually includes vision, dental, hearing, and even in-home healthcare while putting a $200 per year cap on prescription drug prices. So it's an extremely important policy. And when I look at why it's so important, the first thing we have to look at is how much our current privatized healthcare costs, because that's the problem. The Affordable Care Act did a lot of things. It saved many people's lives, but the problem was it made healthcare more accessible, but not affordable anymore, because we have to look at the facts. I mean, I'm big on data and analytics. I work in engineering technology. We have to look at the fact that, unfortunately, the health and pharmaceutical industries, they hired think tanks to write this legislation, the Affordable Care Act. So the Affordable Care Act did a lot of good things, but at the same time, it still has a lot of problems. And that's why we're still seeing medical bankruptcies. So
I just want to jump in real quick. I love the fact that you turned, there's the phrase, I think Noam Chomsky in Manufactured Consent uses the phrase flak machines. I love that you turned that into the phrase the dink, was it dink machines is what you called them? Was that, or something like dink, dink, am I getting some?
But I mean, I get the reference you're saying, and that's pretty awesome.
Oh, you get the am I getting my things confused here real quick? Because I thought you were talking about, because like the flak machines that he refers to, like, aren't those the same kind of institutions that are putting out like the same kind of research that research that is like like the kind of research you were referring to, like the kind of like arguments that are just like put out there in order to discredit like universal healthcare despite like its overwhelming success in other countries.
Yeah, and
right, of course.
And it actually goes further than healthcare. We have the problem of the fossil fuel industry having lobbyists and think tanks that are putting out anti-climate change propaganda. We have pharmaceutical companies going out there and lying to people, saying that if we do something like universal healthcare, it's going to raise prescription drug costs. There's so much disinformation because when you have the wealthiest corporations and industries in basically the world, and they have a financial interest in staying that way, that's their job. they're going to spend as much money as it takes to continue making that money, even if it means lying to people and trying to condition and convince people that what they're doing is actually not what's in their own best interest. And we see this all the time with politics, with our legislators, with, politicians, with the media and different things like that. It's a big scam against the working class people. But that's so important that we're having conversations like this, that we're talking about it, that we're using our platforms to get through to as many people as possible to start to open up people's eyes. And we can tell you all day long, oh, well, the health and pharmaceutical industry wrote the Affordable Care Act, and you're probably not going to believe us, or it's going to go in one ear and out the other. So what you need to do, do your own due diligence and do some research. Just, search, look it up. Who wrote the Affordable Care Act? Who does it really help? What does the Affordable Care Act do to insurance companies? How much money have insurance companies made since the Affordable Care Act came to law? There's a lot of different things you can do for yourself to figure it out, so that, me just telling you things doesn't go in one ear and out the other, but you actually start to understand and recognize and see that there is a problem, and this is all really actually happening.
The beautiful thing about that too, Dan, I've actually had the pleasure to sit down with Wendell Potter and actually have a discussion with him. He's a whistleblower who used to work for Cigna insurance company. Mm-hmm. And so, no better person to talk to about how the pharmaceutical companies, spend and lie. And he basically says, I used to do that for a living. That was his job. His job was to give misinformation and to make sure that you didn't get universal health care in this country. And so when you have someone who works for these companies who's coming out, whistleblowing and basically talking about what he had to do for a living, you don't need any other proof. Yeah. You can't say that, oh, just Cigna was doing it, not the other companies. No, they all do it, right? Mm-hmm. So you can't even use this cover argument, because some people will do that. And I have to, I always, as an activist, I always say, well, no, they all do. No, there's no such thing as one good pharmaceutical company. And you say you like your health insurance. That's because you don't know that what's better out there. You just don't. Yeah. You gotta kind of be emboldened and kind of say things like that, because ultimately speaking, they don't know. I'm not trying to be rude to people. I'm just saying that we all did. I fall for that. We all believed at one point in our lives that this is as best we can get as Americans, and that's not true. There's so many other countries that actually have a better system. Sure, it's not perfect, but we're the richest country in the world. We actually can get better here. We just we just have people with money interests who can just afford to, as they say, manufacture consent, as Namtachi would say, to reference him, to get us to believe that.
I wanted to talk about is, of course, my number one, healthcare for all. So I had the opportunity to speak to this crowd of people about what healthcare for all is and how much it costs. So let's go into how much it costs. I'll throw a bunch of boring numbers at you real fast and we can get through them and move on. So the way we're going to pay for it is it will be 4% of your income after $29,000. So if you're currently on Medicaid or Medicare and your household income is less than $29,000, it is going to be at no cost to you. The big difference is if you're on Medicaid, you no longer have to call, institution after institution after institution to be like, hey, do you guys accept Medicaid? No? Okay, bye. And then call the next one, because a lot of places don't accept Medicaid. If you're on Medicare, then you're currently paying, for supplements, especially if you have vision, hearing, or dental problems. You're paying, of course, your Advantage plan and all these different things. So that will actually go away, and you won't have to pay for that anymore, and you'll continue to receive the same service you're receiving now. How do we pay for it? All right. 4% of your income after $29,000. The average household income in Arkansas last year was $48,000. So if you take $48,000 and you subtract $29,000, 4% of that comes down to about $660 per year. So that means the average Arkansan family will pay $660 per year. No more premiums, deductibles, copays, $200 per year prescription drug cap costs. So if you're a diabetic or your child's a diabetic and you fill your first prescription in January for $200, the rest of the year, your prescriptions cost to you, covered. So if you want to look at some other states, because we are the 49th poorest state, we have extremely low household incomes here. There are actually many, many counties in Arkansas that still have a household income lower than $25,000 per year.
Whoa!
So it's absolutely terrible. But let's break it down to like $100,000 a year. If you're a small business owner, if you're a 1099 worker, you want to have health insurance. How are you going to pay for it? 4% of your income after $29,000. So you take $100,000, subtract 29, leaves you with 71, and 4% of that is approximately $233 per month. to cover your entire household. That is so much cheaper than what many working class people are currently paying. My wife and I, we have decent jobs. It's just the two of us and our 9-year-old daughter, and we pay $860 a month to Blue Cross Blue Shield for our health insurance premium. $860 a month. And on top of that, we still have copays, we still have prescription drug costs, and we still have a $1,500 deductible. So we have to pay Blue Cross Blue Shield $11,000 a year before they even help us out. While I was in Fox, actually, it's terrible. My wife called me, and I'm like, Fox, Arkansas is like 3.5 hours away from where I live. So it was a little bit of a drive. And she calls me, and she's like, hey, Dan, I just swallowed a chicken bone. I don't know what to do. My throat's swelling up. So she called a friend, and she's like, I'm going to head over to the emergency room. So I'm like, dang, I finish up my speech and I leave as quickly as I can, and I start heading this way. And I get here. They had already done x-rays. They looked in her throat. They said it was probably the bone it looked like there was a laceration and it had cut her throat, but there was no bone in her throat. So she was there for about 3 hours. I mean, we're in a little town called Bella Vista, Arkansas. I mean, there's like nobody here. And I mean, the hospital, when I got there, I didn't see one person. All I saw was the staff behind the desk. And so my wife is like one of the only people in there. They send us on our way. They say, well, if it gets worse, come back. And they sent us a bill for like $1,000 for a visit and an x-ray. And we pay $860 a month. We're paying the premiums, we're paying the copays, and we're still just paying so much money because you never know when an emergency is going to happen. It's something like 70% of Americans can't even afford an unexpected $1,000 bill like that. It's just absolutely insane. So I've talked about what the problem is. I've talked about what the solution is. I've talked about how we're going to pay for it. Now, what we need to do as people is get this message out there. We've got to share this message, educate as many people as possible, and especially Democratic candidates that don't support healthcare for all, because they only don't support it because they're ignorant to what it is. And by ignorant, I mean it in a derogatory manner. I mean it as they just simply don't know. So we got to do what we can to educate people with everything I just told you. Sorry, that was a long rant.
No,
it's fine. I mean, it's I've already started in my community. I was telling a few comrades that I had the pleasure to start to talk to some business owners here in New York City. I shouldn't say a good thing about this, but unfortunately, COVID made it easier for me as an activist, even though I didn't start becoming an activist until COVID. But because everyone's still talking about COVID, even though the mask mandates now in New York City is lifted and, we can walk around with no mask and stuff.
Yeah, I think Hawaii was the last state, I think, to lift I think Hawaii just lifted their mask mandates.
Yeah.
I think they're the last, Yeah,
COVID is still a very prominent thing that everyone still talks about. And a lot of businesses here in New York are still suffering, even after 2 years. And some are struggling, some of them closed down. And so it's much easier for me to go in to talk to a business owner because they're happy for you coming in, just saying hello and buying a coffee. And I say this often. And so I've actually had the pleasure to talk to some of them about, my activism, and they're open to sit down with me. And I don't think that before COVID, that would have been an easier thing because a lot of business owners are too busy to even sit down and have a chance to talk to because they're running their operation. But now, because business was really slow, even though people are going out, it's still not the same. They're still struggling. No one's addressed that. And I think that talking to them and say, hey, listen, do you think if we had an actual healthcare plan, a nationalized healthcare system, do you think your business suffered? And a few people that I've talked to have said yes. And I think that's how we're going to get people involved in, Medicare-For-All or healthcare-for-all. But just asking that very simple question and say, hey, would you like to talk more about this when you're not busy running your operation? Would you want to sit down and have a discussion? And so that's where I'm taking my activism now. I'm focusing more on trying to get mutual aid, other groups that's not necessarily focused on healthcare, and then also small businesses to come together to figure out a way, how can we address this? How can we talk to our congressperson? How can we talk to the mayor? How we can talk to different other folks to get them engaged and say, listen, what happens when we have another pandemic?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What are you going to do?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great point. And so are you doing this like of your own volition? Are you doing this in coordination with March for Medicare for All, or is it sort of a mix of both? Or
as of right now, I am doing it on my own, but I would love for more groups to come in to start doing that. because I want to get the idea that we should start reaching out to folks that may not know about these issues and kind of activate people who are not activists and try to get them involved in something, whatever it is to challenge, the status quo currently. Because the problem is that, as Dan was beautifully said, that a lot of people just don't know. And so by educating them and getting them out there to challenge power, hopefully, my opinion, I think it would work, but hopefully it engages and move the conversation further so we actually do get it. Because I think that people just don't know these issues. They don't know that it's possible. They don't know it's out there. And I think that more and more people get engaged and they do feel that the community do care. Because most people right now, like if your business folds, and I was even talking to a friend of mine who does have a business too. I was like, these business owners, corporations, they got bailed out during COVID. Small business did not, right? So that doesn't happen. Small businesses, like I've seen even before COVID, if a business doesn't do well in my neighborhood, it just shuts down. No one asks questions. No one says, "Oh, what happens?" No one gives them money. No one cares. Just we move on. It just wash, rinse, repeat. This business close up. They put a laundromat. This business close. They open a barbershop. So that's what just happens. There's no bailout, right? No one sees that before. But corporations like a Starbucks or Amazon, or whatever, they get bailed out. There's an issue, and so by saying that publicly and addressing that, and saying, "Hey, what did you get during COVID?" Nothing, right? So don't you think we should have that, at least have a discussion about that? Let's at least talk about that. And so that's just saying it that way has opened the conversation with people. Just put them in a situation where having them think about, okay, well, what did that do for you? What did it do for your family? Do you think that's fair? Do you think that's right? Have them answer the question instead of speaking for them. Because you'd be surprised that most people, because of pandemic, because of COVID, they're on your side now, right? No matter what, politically, what they align with. And I think that's beautiful. And I said, sorry to say it like that way, but I did feel that during a disastrous situation, people kind of think the same. They're kind of on the same page.
Yeah. And that will, taking a little bit back to the jury days of right after Bernie, basically like right after Las Vegas, where like Bernie, started like losing the primaries. That was the thing that always baffled me about his loss, was as this pandemic was raging, you had one candidate who was only for a public option, another one who was for, like a universal healthcare system. It surprised me that Bernie wasn't able to make that argument right at the start of the pandemic, and I hope sooner rather than later maybe people will at least like while the memory of the pandemic is still fresh in our minds, someone will maybe start to make that messaging a lot more clear, I think.
Yeah. Three things now that I kind of want to mention. As far as that goes, what Bernie Sanders did, he really suspended his campaign for the most part in March of 2020 when everything started closing down. People were really starting to get sick and die. And, he had done a call, a campaign call nationwide, and he got over 5,000 people to volunteer to be team captains on one phone call in an hour. And after that, we had COVID. I had actually hosted 2 house parties myself. And I think mostly the reason he had dropped out, because that wasn't, had to stop putting Medicare-For-All at that federal, national platform level, was because he was just more concerned about his volunteers and his supporters and the people. And he didn't want to put his policies before people's lives, which, unfortunately, we have lost a lot of lives because these policies didn't get passed back then. But what we can do is we can learn from that and move forward. And Shareef, I'm so glad you actually brought up small businesses, because there is business aspect to healthcare for all. We will actually have businesses pay for it as well. Yes, we will pay 4% of our income after $29,000. Now, businesses will actually also pay for it. Our employers, they will pay 7% of our income towards healthcare for all as well. Now, what that means for like the average business, my wife and I, we work for a Fortune 500 company. We're low pegs on the totem pole, but our company matches 100%. So we're paying Blue Cross Blue Shield $11,000 a year. Our employer is paying Blue Cross Blue Shield about $11,000 per year as well. So our company will save so much money as well for, every single employee. And when we look at like small businesses who can't afford to offer benefits like healthcare to their employees, someone they're paying $15 an hour to, or $20 an hour to, well, number one, if they're making less than $29,000 a year, they'll get it for free anyways. But if they make a little bit more, they're still just going to have to pay 4% of their income, and their employer's just going to have to pay 7% of that after. So now we'll have small businesses who've never been able to offer benefits before, able to offer benefits, which gives them competitive advantages when looking for employees, especially when people are having labor shortages right now. So I just wanted to bring in the business side too, because that's actually really important. And I really don't get to talk about it enough, but it does be in a video like this that we can share to get that information out there to educate people.
I'll be very curious to know. So the small businesses that I've talked to, they're really small. I'm talking about like bodegas, barbershops, hair salons, places like that. They don't offer healthcare to their employees, and so a lot of them, even when I talk to, they only know Medicare-For-All from Bernie Sanders. They don't even know about there's healthcare groups out there. They have no idea about all the inner workings that go along with with healthcare activism. For before they even talked to me, they didn't even know that such thing kind of existed. They do know that obviously there's tons of protests in New York for different issues, but people, it's kind of a blanket sort of thing for them. So my curiosity is that if a nationalized healthcare system saves money for businesses like yours, Dan, why aren't there a lot more businesses out there screaming about this? Because me personally, if I was a Fortune 500 company, right, and I'm paying healthcare for my staff, if a nationalized healthcare system is going to save me money, I'm going to be like, I'm going to call so-and-so on the phone, like, let's get this going. Why are we not doing this? Let's go. Because at the end of the day, not only it makes my business better, it's better for the economy. So I would like to be in a room with some of these folks that know that this is going to save them money. Why are you screaming about it? Like, why are you not having? Because if you're a Fortune 500 company, I'm pretty sure you rub elbows with certain people of 1%. You know this, right? So why aren't you being more aggressive publicly, using your platform, using the bully pulpit, so to speak, to say, hey, we need a nationalized healthcare system? So I find that a little weird for me, and I would love to be in the conversation with them and say, hey, why this? You would save money in your business, right? This would be benefiting to your staff. Why wouldn't you want that? So I think there has to be some other play here, and for me, I think that's interesting.
I can give you three perspective reasons on why I think it's that way. Number one, our legislators take money from the health and pharmaceutical industry and will continue to vote against healthcare for all because it costs their donors money. Right. I think a lot of these because these corporations they're ran by a board, and I don't think a lot of these boards or the CEOs, the people making big decisions on macro level like that, I don't think they really understand what healthcare for all is. I think it's a lot of ignorance. A lot of it, absolutely, they have no idea how much money they would be saving because not enough people are talking about it. Have you ever heard? And I mean, you're part of the Medicare-For-All movement. You founded it. Have you ever heard anyone talk about the business side, that it would cost 7% of an employee's income before we just?
It's very small, small people, very small. Like it's very like and when I was at the march, maybe like maybe about 3 or 4 people I knew there, and then collectively outside of the march for Medicare-For-All. If it wasn't someone like a Shahid Buttar, if it wasn't someone like a Wendell Potter, different folks that I've actually had pleasure to actually sit down and talk to, no, you know what I mean. And these are great gentlemen that know legislation, they know the policies, they know inside and outside, they live this kind of thing every day. And so having the pleasure to kind of talk to them is the reason why I kind of even know all the stuff that I know. And so, yeah, we don't have enough people that even when I was with, and this is no disrespect to One Payer State or to Whole Washington and different other groups like that. Even when I was on a call with them, very few of them and even engaging with small businesses or even other or even corporations. I know that Whole Washington just recently, I think they have a union that's endorsing their signatures, because they're getting more people involved, which I think is a beautiful thing, because I think we should fight on all fronts. I definitely agree with that philosophy, but we don't have enough unions and we don't have enough businesses in general, in my opinion, in the healthcare fight. And that's also my point why I wanted to, even last year, to focus more on that And this is why this year I said that, well, I don't have a big enough reach yet. So let me start locally in my community where I know for a fact that there are small businesses in my neighborhood who are doing just as bad as I am. And I can have that conversation with them. I can go in, have a coffee. They'll talk to me for about 5 to 10 minutes because, again, no one's coming into the establishment. It's not like going into a Starbucks that may be doing that in my neighborhood, but at the same time, people's gonna travel and come in. I'm talking about a lot of these businesses in my neighborhood in New York. They're a desert, right? And I mean that literally. Like, they don't know when the next person's gonna come into their store, and no one's helping them. There's no one who has addressed that issue, and so it's easy for me. And this is why I want to get a campaign around this and start talking to other healthcare activists. Talk to your business owner in your community and see where they are and see if they would be interested in talking about healthcare and see if they would talk about doing some direct actions or something, contacting congressperson, whatever it is. Because again, if it's like here in New York where I live, if it's like that where you are, I'm pretty sure they'll engage in conversation with you because a lot of these folks, they're happy to see someone come in their door. They really are. And like the fact you come in, just talk with them and buy something has been, as an activist, I've been really like energized because I'm actually having someone talk to me about healthcare that's a business owner. And so having that on record is amazing, I think.
Yeah, no, Shareef, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
And just to really, cause I'm, well, for one, I'm going to be very careful in my wording here because I want to be sure I can put this up on the airwaves. I don't want to call anyone to action. We can't do that on the airwaves. But anyone, there are going to be a lot of Henderson students probably listening to this, and Dan, you might know this, Shareef, maybe you do. I don't know how well known our nursing program is here, but we have a pretty good nursing program here. It actually puts out like a number of like it provides a number of nurses to like even just like the local doctor offices around Arkadelphia. I don't know about so there's also a Baptist University across the road. There's literally like a road that divides us two. It's kind of like a Krusty Krab chum bucket kind of relationship. Anyways, to any OBU HSU students, there are a lot of small businesses around Arkadelphia. I mean, I myself, I work at station as station manager. I mean, I've gone into Sheffield Music and a couple of other places just to ask them like about, if they'd be interested in sponsoring the station. They love talking to people about their business. So if you approach them, if you're really concerned about Medicare-For-All, and I know there are a few students here who are, if you're really concerned about Medicare-For-All, if you like, say for example, you went into just a local burger joint around here and just went up to like one of the workers, been like, hey, you heard about Medicare-For-All or something? Obviously don't pest. I'm not. Anyways, you get the point. You can have those conversations with local business owners around here. So that's that's certainly one way that like you can like actually like help get leftist economic policies passed.
I think, that really comes back again. My third point to Shareef's question: why don't giant corporations and Fortune 500 companies support something like Healthcare for All? Well, unfortunately, right now, pretty much the only people who support Healthcare for All are going to be Democrats. And these giant corporations don't want Democrats in office because we regulate these industries to protect consumers. We make sure that they can't avoid taxation and things like that. So they will actually, they save more money by having no regulations and being able to put profits before people. They make more money by being able to use these legal tax, evasion loopholes rather than if they were to save money from healthcare. And I think that's kind of probably when I look at problems, there are so many unknown variables that we could never account for all the variables, and all we account for the variables that we can think of. And I think those are some of the ones that I can think of that are probably big, reasons why we don't have that support we need. But again, if you just start talking to people, talk to the employees, talk to the owners, when you talk to someone, make sure you know how to tell them how we're going to pay for it. It's not hard. 4% of your income after $29,000. If you're an employer, it's going to be 7% of your employees' income after $29,000. That's it. It's not hard, but know those numbers and make sure you actually explain it to them so they understand, and they'll listen to you. I promise they, no matter whether they're a Democrat or Republican, if you're saying how they're going to save money and save their families money while actually getting healthcare when they need it, they're going to listen.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you think, to that point too, do you think that my approach is talking to small business owners. Do you think if there's like a tsunami of like small business owners across the country who get engaged, you think that also would have to you think that would also like I guess help energize the movement, so to speak? Because right now we have a lot of Starbucks is unionizing, we have Amazon's unionizing, we have like a new wave for like businesses are unionizing. So you do see like a giant solidarity for employers getting together and saying, hey, these are the rights we want to have at the workplace. And then again, echoing how small businesses are suffering. Do you think that could be a good way to like get those Fortune 500 companies to say, okay, well, I don't want my business to be unionized, right? I don't want that to happen. So let's give these people some healthcare. Let's fight, because let's make sure that's saving happening at Starbucks right now. Let's not bring that over here.
Well, I would there's no conversation too small. Even if you're sitting at a bus stop talking to the person next to you and explain to them, there are 38 modernized nations in the world. 37 of them have some 40 of universal healthcare, and we don't.
Right.
We're the one that doesn't. And explain to them again how we're going to pay for it, what it is, and what it covers. And there's no conversation too small to be had. The bus stop, the grocery, waiting in line. Just talk to people, because word of mouth, that's how we're going to get it out. When we have to fight the health and pharmaceutical industry, who's literally going to spend hundreds of billions of dollars to protect their trillions of dollars of interests over the next several years, they will spend that money. They will put that misinformation out, and they will have the radio waves, the TV advertisement, our politicians in their pockets. But they can't stop us from having these conversations with each other, and to the point where if we can get 80 or 90% of the people actually knowing what it is, we will get legislation passed.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so two things. First off, Dan, I like you brought up the influence of big money. I want to get back to that, but real quick, because we brought up unions. I just want to point this out. There's a great for anyone who is an Office fan. There's like a Twitter thread where someone wrote like their own idea of an Office episode where Dunder Mifflin tries to unionize. And so it's this whole thread. It is they get it spot on. Just check that out. It is it's so funny. I'll send it to y'all when after we're done recording.
I bet Mike all wanted it first, and then he'd realize what it was, and then try to fight against it the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll send that to y'all. But Dan, I wanted to come. So the part, after both times like recording, my favorite part, that I think we've gotten to do in both recordings, because I think this is something that's like really important for especially like people who are concerned about the influence of big money in politics. Really important to look up how candidates are financed.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I feel like maybe we should have started off this to like let everyone know, like, because I don't want to be like, oh, hey, Dan Whitfield's like this politician with this policy, so I'm just going to have him on here. There's a reason why I think, Dan, why I wanted to have Dan on here with us. I mean, yes, he does agree with us, but on top of it too, I can actually say that he is an honest actor, because I've looked this up for myself using the school tool called OpenSecrets.org. So what I want to do is, I have our source view opened up here. So what I want to do is let me actually open up the window for myself, and let me get to OpenSecrets.org. Dan, and I'll share the screen with you too. A window.
Yeah, and while you're doing that, kind of where this kind of comes into play is like, I mean, I grew up in a very conservative Republican household. I was a Republican for most of my life because I was just ignorant. I was so politically uninterested. I voted for people simply because the letter in front of their name, without knowing a single policy supported or what they've even done in their career. And in 2015, Bernie Sanders woke me up to the corruption. He opened my eyes, not by telling me about the corruption, but by giving me the tools and informing me about the tools that I needed to open my eyes for myself. Now, When I do interviews, I like to try to plug two websites. The first one is going to usually be votesmart.org. If you go to votesmart.org, type in a politician's name. We'll use Tom Cotton, for example, because he is the least popular politician in Arkansas. You go to VoteSmart, you can enter any politician's name, hit votes, and you can see how they voted throughout their entire career. It's a nonpartisan website. It doesn't give any opinions. It is just cold, hard facts, how they voted, what the bill was. So what you can do is you can go to votesmart.org and look up your politicians, your representatives, and you can see how they've been voting to represent you and your family. And now the second thing you can do is you can go to opensecrets.org. And at opensecrets.org, you can type in that politician's name, and now you can see where their money is coming from. So now you can see how politician A is voting and see how politician A is getting their money, and, you know, kind of correlate, is this person voting for things because they're getting money from those lobbyists, or is this person voting that way because it's best for my family? And it's really the best tool, it's the voter defense system. It's the best tools we can give other people, especially independents and Republicans, to open their eyes for themselves, because we can tell people all day long that Tom Cotton took $8.4 million from the Koch brothers, and in exchange he voted on legislation that temporarily for 1 year put a hold on the estate tax, which saved the Koch, one of the Koch's widows that year, over $25 billion in taxes, because the estate tax happened to be repealed by legislators that took money from the Koch brothers. I can tell you stuff like that all day long. You'd be like, oh yeah, whatever. But you can see it. Like, you use your eyes, and then you can start to understand. And we are 100% grassroots. We, at this point, haven't taken any money from PACs, from political parties. Now, that will be changing a little bit. I have talked with my team, and it takes money to win a campaign, unfortunately. 86% of the time, the candidate with more money wins. And I have danforarkansas.com is my website. I have an issues tab on there, and I have all of my policies on my issues tab, and it is quite extensive, I warn you. And if I currently support a policy, if a PAC, say a PAC that supported Medicare-For-All, wanted to donate the limit to me, I would take that PAC money, because I already support Medicare-For-All, and I wouldn't be selling myself out to that PAC. So we may end up taking some PAC money, especially like climate change initiatives, voice initiatives and things like that, because it takes money to win an election. And my opponent, unfortunately, Tom Bozeman, has raised millions of dollars from pro-life groups, from fossil fuel industries, from these different other special interests. But I'll never take money from a super PAC of dark money, and I will never take money from billionaires. So I'm still going to work for y'all. Just to make that clear real quick, because I know I never wanted to take PAC money. I never wanted to take special interest money. I never wanted to take money from a political party, like, say, the Democratic Party of Arkansas, or of America, or of a county. But the truth is, the sad fact is, you have to take some of this money, especially running as a Democrat, from the Democratic Party. It's going to happen, but I'll still work for y'all. None of my, morals have changed. I'm still the same person. I still support the same policies. I just wanted to make sure that was clear. And if you look,
I was just referring to specifically corporate PAC money, like dark
corporate PAC money at all ever.
I wanted to ask you, Dan, too, because you said you used to be a Republican. Is it? And forgive me if this sounds like a weird question, because I'm someone that grew up in a neighborhood where it says always vote Democrat, never Republican, and no one ever explained the nuance of why that is. I didn't learn that until much older. And so this is one of the reasons why I never voted, because I had tons of questions. I was one of those kids growing up. I asked questions about everything, and if I found that people just couldn't answer my question, I just didn't engage, because I wanted to kind of just very inquisitive. And so when it comes, especially with politics in my neighborhood, when I grew up, there was never a nuanced discussion about Democrat versus Republican, why this candidate was good to vote for, why this person wasn't good to vote for. So is there really a need? Let's say if I grew up Republican, is there really a need to switch to Democrat? If, let's say, if I want to, if I believe in climate change, or I believe in Medicare-For-All, like if I believe in these certain issues, is there a reasoning behind switching parties if you agree with more or less certain policies? Are there such a thing, someone who's running for Republican who cares about Medicare-For-All legitimately, not saying that as far as sloganeering wise, but to say, hey, I really believe in this. Yes, I'm a Republican and I agree with all these other things, but I do agree with Medicare-For-All. I do agree with climate change because I do think that's a problem. Because I tend to feel like, as a healthcare activist, people don't really believe that, Republicans care about Medicare-For-All. And I do have a lot of comrades who I work with who are Republican. Mm-hmm. And so I find it interesting people have that kind of belief. And I think and again, this is not something this is my understanding. I think we need to separate the difference between people who are running for office as Republican and versus who's your voter or who lives in your neighborhood who's Republican. And I think those are two different people. And I think people kind of lump them together. And this is my experience because, again, like I said, I know Republicans, again, who live in my neighborhood, they believe in the same issues that I do. So again, no one's explained these things because, again, people don't want to have that nuanced conversation.
Yeah.
I fully feel. I totally feel with you there, Shareef. Like I can, and that's a. Yeah, I've noticed at least I can think of 2 or 3 Republicans. Like I've had discussions with them in the past 2 or 3 years where it's just like they're like, yeah, like universal health care. That's
makes sense, right? You meet right, absolutely. You meet a lot of people, no matter what political side they're on. You talking about basic, simple issues, they kind of agree with you. So that's why I'm like, okay, well, explain to me why do I need to run as a Republican? Why do I need to run as a Democrat? Why are you so sure that this person, if they're a Republican, don't really believe with this issue? Why are you so sure the Democrat does? Or vice versa. So that nuanced conversation people tend to don't like to have is kind of like, oh, you should just know that. You know what I mean? They kind of give this idea that Republican bad, Democrat good sort of thing. And they're like, I'm tired of hearing that, but no one wants to have that discussion.
Same. I found a professor. I had a professor send me an email with that. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I had a professor send me that. Anyway.
No, I know. And it happens everywhere. It happens at work. It happens in school. It happens in your neighborhood. And again, I'm I'm very candid about my political views. I feel both Democrat and Republican are equally bad. However, at the same time, that I just don't think that you should broad people with a broad stroke. You know what I mean? And I feel like there needs to be a conversation, just historically, okay, how do Republicans typically vote? How Democrats typically vote? If so, again, why these policies typically line Republican, why these policies typically line Democrat? And if so, is there some crossover? Are there Republicans, who run for office who say, yeah, climate change is a big issue. This is a big issue. This is a problem. The world's going to end. Mm-hmm. Or healthcare is a problem. We need to make sure that's covered. So things like that should be discussed. And again, like I said, in our communities, at least if I can speak for my community, those conversations just never had.
No, they really do. And there are progressive Republicans that win. It's just unfortunate they usually lose in their primaries. They always usually lose. When we look at Arkansas specifically, I was looking at the voter data recently, more recently, all the time. 90,000 people are registered as a Democrat in Arkansas. There are only 90,000 registered Democrats in our entire state. There are about 117,000 registered Republicans in our state. So we have 1.56 million independent voters in Arkansas, by far the largest voting bloc, because, a lot of people feel that way where, they may lean one way on one issue, towards social issues, and one way towards taxation, another way, issue. But these are conversations we need to have, and we need to make sure that we are looking into our candidates, not just what party they are, but what they believe in. Some people may call me a radical because I think of really radical policies like, how interesting would it be to, while you're waiting in line to vote, there are little monitors that have 30-second clips of the different candidates giving a 30-second speech on policies they support, so that you actually know who you're voting for and what policies they support. Could you imagine going to vote on voter day and it doesn't say what party someone's affiliated with? It doesn't say if they're Republican or a Democrat. You just need due diligence.
I personally think we should have an app.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think that, there are some radical ideas that could really benefit us as a society so that we can stop using the two-party duopoly to control the flow of government. The whole reason political parties were created was to help candidates get elected to control the flow of government in the United States of America. That was the whole point that we created the parties. And we used to have so many political parties like other countries where it was very diverse. But unfortunately, when you have a two-party system, you just it doesn't matter anymore. It's really sad to talk about and to think about and to understand. But the fact is we have Republicans and Democrats running for the same exact position, taking money from the same exact billionaires. Billionaires are giving both of the opponents money because they know no matter who they wins, they're going to have pull with those candidates. So we really have to take a big, giant macro look at our entire political system. And I'm very careful with my messaging. I never just use blanket phrases like Republicans are bad. I always revert back down to the GOP, to elected Republican officials, because it's the elected Republican officials that are the ones that are really voting on raising our taxes, helping, their special interest owners and this. And it's not Republican voters. Republican voters are just like us. They're just regular people going to work, raising their kids, trying to get their kids through school and going through these same struggles we're all paying. High taxes, low wages, high inflation, high gas prices. These have nothing to do with, an executive administration. These are things that are put into place so corporations can maximize profits while people suffer. And, poverty is a policy choice. I say it all the time. Poverty is a policy choice. We could end poverty tomorrow. We just have to have politicians with political courage. But we also have to look at the fact that you can't have a billionaire class without poverty.
Right.
You have to accumulate all the wealth into a small group of people. Then that means there's a large group of people that's not going to have a lot of wealth.
Right.
That's why they work so hard to keep poverty in place. We could end homelessness in America tomorrow. We could end all of homelessness. 17% of all homeless are vets, by the way, if you didn't know. End it tomorrow for $25 billion. Sounds like a freaking ton of money, but you know what? That's 3% of our military budget.
Right.
In the military budget. No more homeless people. We could end hunger tomorrow for $20 billion. We could end hunger and homelessness for 6% of the military budget. I mean, it's just insane that we aren't doing these things. But poverty is a policy choice. And unfortunately, it's voted on by people who have never had to live in poverty, will never live in poverty, and don't understand what it's like to, live as a regular working class American.
Right. That's a fact.
Yeah, Shareef. So I'm actually I just thought of this because we were talking. I think we were talking about how we need to, how you were talking about how we need to really focus on like elected officials and like trying to get like good elected officials into office. Shareef, you're based out of I think you said you're based out of New York.
Mm-hmm.
What do you know of any like Do you know of any politicians in your area that are like running on Healthcare-For-All or Medicare-For-All or some universal healthcare platform?
To be honest with you, no, I don't know anyone who's running honestly right now currently as 2022. And if I were to vote for someone currently right now, because I know that person personally, because I haven't seen a campaign, haven't seen a flyer or an ad or anything of anyone who's running for office. I have no idea who's running, and that might be due to the fact of COVID. That might be due to the fact of the people who are running here they don't have the financial reach to get everyone. Because I live in Astoria. I used to live in Jackson Heights, so I just recently moved as of last year. So even then I didn't know who was running, and even now I still don't know who's running. So and that's also a problem too. Why I also feel that why a lot of people just don't they kind of vote down the ballot blocks. Oh, the Democrats running. Okay, I'll just vote for Democrat because my father's that way. My father's that way, and I make a joke about this, and a lot of people don't believe me. I said if Donald Trump ran Democrat, he would have voted for him, and that's the hard fact. Like a lot of people just need to realize that a lot of people they do vote Democrat just regardless, no matter who's running, and so that's a problem in itself. If people don't care as much as about policies than it is about a party. that's a really hard thing to kind of like grapple with, especially when we talk about issues. Even in my community, this is why I kind of like try not to talk too much about about how who's taking money here and who's taking money there. I just kind of keep it very primal, like how this affects you. Do you think this is a problem? Kind of talk to them how the same way I would talk to my son, and kind of like, for example, I started talking to my son about climate change because now he's talking about climate change because his school is talking about it, and he's very shocked at the fact that people just don't believe in it. And he says, Dad, dinosaurs died because a meteorite hit the earth. And I says, Junior, there's some people who don't believe in dinosaurs. He's like, what? That's crazy. It doesn't make sense. He said, they got bones in the museum, Dad. I was like, what are you talking about? He said, dinosaurs are real. It's right there. And I was like, okay. I just started laughing because he's adorable. I said, Junior, you got a lot to learn, son. There's a lot of people who don't believe in a lot of things, Junior. I'm telling you. And so these people who run the world, obviously, right? These corporations, these fossil fuel companies, they're in charge. They can do whatever they want. And so you have to educate yourself in what your teacher is doing right now. Thank God, my son's school is doing it. I don't think every school is doing it. That actually having that real conversation about climate change, and now he wants to be a climate change activist.
Wow.
Because Dad's an activist. He's talking about climate change, and he was like, Dad, we got to do something about this. I said, all right, Junior, we'll talk. We'll see what we can do. Yeah.
Oh, God bless that.
Yeah.
I love that's
Yeah.
that's great.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Even when I was like a kid, like I remember like having like what was it? I think Scholastic would put out like this like 4-page like little magazine.
Right. I remember that.
Yeah, and even they were like talking about climate change at the time. I must have been desensitized already by then, because it was just like, for me it was just like, oh, okay, well hopefully we'll do something about that in the future, right? And 10 years later.
Do you remember Captain Planet?
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm starting to show my son that too, and like he's loving it, and because like he's all about climate change now. And he was like, again, I don't believe how you don't understand this. He was like, he was like, the seasons change. It gets hot, it gets cold, things happen. Like he's 11. He's like trying to rationalize like why is a hard thing for people to understand. And it's funny to see a child try to like process why we don't get something. It's funny. I should record this.
Yeah, that's great. Well, honestly, it gives me a little bit of hope. Maybe kids even like younger than me, younger than all of us, are like, becoming more aware of these issues too.
Right. Yeah.
Well, we've minutes left. So I kind of a quick plug to. I am a Democratic candidate, and there are other Democratic candidates. None of them are progressive like me. They don't support healthcare for all. They don't support the federal decriminalization and nationally expunging cannabis convictions. They don't have the diverse group of supporters I have. And I believe that I'm the only one who actually has a chance to beat the GOP opponent that I'll be facing in November. So we do have a primary. The primary is on May 24th. So please, we are an open primary state. That means if you're registered Republican, Independent, Democrat, or anything, you can vote in the Democratic primary. Please show up, show us some support. And, if you believe what I believe is good for our nation, if you believe that, support the policies I support, vote for me. If you don't, then don't. Just please show up and vote, because we need voter turnout. All right. Well, you guys. All right. Thank you so much, Ethan, Shareef.
Absolutely. This was a pleasure, guys.
Thank you so much, friends. This is a lot of fun. And thank you to Google for artificially ending this. Oh, well. Anyways, this is a lot of fun. Thank you so much for tuning in, friends. And we will see you next time. Have a good one.
Absolutely.
Thanks, friends.